Welcome back, and joining me for a closer look of the day's trading session is Imtiaz Suliman from Sentio Capital. Thank you so much for your time, Imtiaz. Before we get into JSE numbers, how is the market feeling ahead of the NVIDIA results today? And actually, the US market's trading in green territory right now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much calm for now. And, NVIDIA's results have almost become like a bellwether indicator of the economy. And I guess because the Nasdaq has done so well, there's a lot of eyes and scrutiny on whether that momentum can continue. We know valuations are and on the sort of stretch side of the long-term history, but nonetheless, the growth has been there. So, market expectations are for revenue to grow at 53%, although it's coming down, but it's still a healthy growth rate of a much bigger base. So Nvidia, $4.5 trillion company. Can it continue the growth, and will that valuation multiple continue to unwind? That's the big question.
Right. Well, quite interesting on the JSE today. One of the big news coming from Curro. We did see a lot of growth in the share price. At some point, I think it was up about 53%, really rocketing on the back of the announcement that was made about the Yanni Mouton Foundation making a firm offer for the rest of the shares in the company. But of course, where we did not see growth was the profit line. Before we get into the numbers, actually, I mean, just from your view, what would it mean for the private education provider and the investors if this deal actually did cross that finish line?
Yeah, I think from an investment perspective, investors have a liquidity event to sell their shares at an attractive premium to where the shares were trading. So it was trading at 8 Rand. Effectively, the offer is at 13 Rand a share. So that's quite a nice premium to the existing share price. And what that will allow Curro as a company to do is essentially grow and build out more schools, because they will transition to a non-profit entity. There won't be this pressure in terms of meeting the half-yearly and full-year numbers. They can reinvest quite a bit into the business. And ultimately, I think for the broader education sector, it's a big positive in terms of them able to fund some of the student intake because they don't have to generate this profit. So it's ultimate good for South Africa. And it will do a huge or make a big difference to the country as a whole.
Well, someone on Twitter actually saying that Curro has reached the non-profit part already. Of course, we know the flatness that we did see in profits. An economic indicator?
Yeah, so, if you look at the overall numbers, revenue was up slightly around 4%, but earnings were flat. There was a one-term adjustment in terms of the write-down that they had, which impacted the ultimate earnings. But it's been one that's been a bit pressured in terms of learner numbers that were down roughly 2%. And this shows that there is stress in the overall economy. So I think the growth profile is still there. They have the capacity to grow the learner numbers from 70,000 to 100,000 learners. And that's what they'll do over the next few years.
Well, where there is no stress is the eating out economy. Bidcorp coming out with year-end results today. Revenue climbing, of course, that growth also translating into headline earnings per share. But that share did lose almost 4%. What level of growth did the company experience?
Yeah, I think, Bidcorp is very much a stable company that's able to produce consistent results year in, year out. So if you look at the overall numbers, they weren't great, but they weren't bad as well. So revenue was up around 4%, earnings up 6%. So you've seen some margin expansion. The different regions perform differently. If you look at the emerging market cluster, South Africa was a standout in that cluster, growing at 15%, and some weakness coming through from China. If you look at Australasia, again, Australia doing well, New Zealand not so much. but Europe has been also producing quite consistent results. They do continuously make these bolt-on acquisitions, and they've done 12 acquisitions in the last period. Post-period trading has also been quite decent. So I think it's pretty much a steady Eddie stock that was probably priced for some of this news, and we've seen some profit taking on the back of that.
All right. Well, we saw weakness, a lot of weakness in the Blue Label share price, that tanking over 17%, and quite interesting because we had just seen an upward climb in about the last year or so. So pretty surprising because they actually did post significant bottom line growth, and saying that Cell C is back to profitability. How did you read those numbers and that reaction?
Yeah, if you look at the Blue Label share price, it's been a one-way up so far year to date, up close to 170%. If you do want to look for some of the negatives, I think there was some pressure on the working capital line, but that could come back next year as they unwind the prepaid element that was bought in this period. And then, post or ultimately when the Cell C listing does happen, there could be some unlock from that perspective.
All right. Well, talking about unlock, what are you seeing unlocking value for you today? Your stock pick, Imtiaz?
Yeah, I'm going for a company also in the telco sector, which is MTN. They did report results last week, and the share has come back on or dropped on the back of that. But I think if you look at the underlying drivers for MTN, the bigger markets are now Nigeria and Ghana, which are growing very strongly. South Africa has been a bit tepid, but I think ultimately they will continue to fix the operations in South Africa. But you're seeing very strong data growth, fintech growth out of those emerging markets such as Nigeria and Ghana, and that's going to bode well for ultimate cash flow generation. And I think you should see dividends starting to pick up at a faster rate than we saw in the last 3 years. So it's trading at a 10 times PE multiple with good dividend growth and good cash flow prospects.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis on what has moved investors' money today. Imtiaz, much appreciated. That was Imtiaz Suliman from Sentio Capital.